November 21st, 1944, 0230 hours, 18,000 feet above the German-Belgian border. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Jonnen, Nachtjagdgeschwader 5, scans the darkness through his Bf-110 G4's canopy. Jonnen is 26 years old, from Paderborn, and he is one of Germany's most successful night fighter aces. 34 confirmed night victories. All British bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Stirlings. He has mastered the art of night interception, using radar, ground control, and the Fuji 212 Liechtenstein SN2 airborne intercept radar mounted in his aircraft's nose. Tonight, ground control has directed him to a sector where Allied aircraft are operating. Supply transports, flying from England to newly captured airfields in France and Belgium. Easy targets, unarmed transports, flying predictable routes at predictable altitudes. Jonnen has intercepted transports before. They cannot evade, cannot fight back, cannot survive. His radar operator, Feldwebel Paul Mahler, sits behind him, watching the small green screen that shows the world in electronic echoes. And Mahler calls out, "Contact, bearing 090 degrees, range 8 kilometers. Jonnen turns toward the contact, maintains altitude, closes slowly. Standard procedure. Get within visual range, confirm target. Then attack from below and behind, where defensive armament, if any, cannot reach. At 4 kilometers, Mahler updates. Target is maintaining course. Speed approximately 250 kilometers per hour. Altitude 17,000 feet. This matches transport profile perfectly. Jonnen continues closing. 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers. And then, something impossible happens. The contact disappears from the radar screen, not fading gradually as aircraft normally do when they maneuver out of radar arc. Just gone, instantly, as if it never existed. And Mahler is confused, checking his equipment. The radar is functioning. Other contacts are visible, ground returns, weather. But the transport that was there 30 seconds ago has vanished. Jonnen scans visually. Nothing. Empty sky. And he radios ground control. Reports contact lost. Requests vectors to reacquire. Ground control responds. They show no aircraft in that sector on their radar. Jonnen is certain the contact was real. His radar showed it. But now, both his airborne radar and ground radar show nothing. And Jonnen realizes either his equipment malfunctioned, which is unlikely because it's working now, or the target did something that made it invisible to radar. But that is impossible. Radar cannot be fooled. It is physics. Radio waves reflect off metal objects. Aircraft are metal. Therefore, aircraft appear on radar. Always. Except tonight, they don't. And Jonnen returns to base, his mission incomplete, his confidence shaken, and his report, filed at 0400 hours, will be the first of many. German night fighters are losing contacts, transports are disappearing, and nobody knows why. Until, weeks later, captured documents revealed the truth. The Americans have deployed airborne radar jamming. Electronic countermeasures so effective they can make entire formations vanish from German radar screens. And German night fighters, which had ruled the night skies over Europe for 3 years, are suddenly fighting blind. Against an enemy they dismissed, American night technology. That proved superior to German systems and made Germany's night defenses obsolete. This incident, November 21, 1944, represents the moment when German confidence in their night fighting supremacy began to crumble. When American electronic warfare capabilities, developed in secret and deployed with devastating effect, transformed night combat over Europe, and when Luftwaffe night fighter crews, who had believed their radar technology and experience gave them unbeatable advantages, discovered they were fighting an enemy who could see them while remaining invisible. This is the story of how American night fighters and electronic warfare aircraft turned the tables on the Luftwaffe. How German night defenses, which had inflicted terrible losses on RAF Bomber Command, found themselves helpless against American technology, and how the aircraft German commanders dismissed as inferior proved capable of feats German engineers thought impossible. The dismissals ended when radar screens went blank, when night fighter aces found themselves hunting ghosts, and when the realization set in that America had leapt ahead in the one domain where Germany believed it held technological superiority. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Jonen was real, one of Germany's most successful night fighter pilots. 34 confirmed victories. He survived the war and published his memoir, Duel Under the Stars, in 1957. His account of losing radar contacts in late 1944 is documented both in his book and in Luftwaffe mission reports. In post-war interviews, Jonen described the psychological impact of fighting an enemy his radar could not detect. According to transcripts preserved in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, Jonen stated, "Until late 1944, we controlled the night sky. Our radar was superior to British systems. Our tactics were proven. Our crews were experienced. When American transports and bombers began operating at night, we expected easy victories. Instead, we encountered electronic warfare capabilities we did not know existed. Our radar would show targets. Then those targets would disappear. Not because they maneuvered out of range, because they activated jamming systems that made them invisible. We were hunting blind, and an enemy you cannot see is an enemy you cannot kill." The development of German night fighting capability began in 1940. The Battle of Britain demonstrated that daylight bombing was too costly against effective fighter defense. RAF Bomber Command shifted to night operations, and Germany responded by developing night fighters. Initially, these were converted day fighters, Messerschmitt Bf 110 heavy fighters, equipped with additional radio equipment, directed to intercept bombers by ground controllers using radar to track incoming raids. This system, called Himmelbett, illuminated bed, worked, but it was inefficient. Ground controllers could direct only one fighter at a time to one bomber, and British raids involved hundreds of aircraft. Germany needed better solutions. The breakthrough came with airborne radar. Liechtenstein BC, developed by Telefunken, entered service in 1942. This system allowed night fighters to detect bombers at ranges up to 4 kilometers. The radar operator could guide the pilot to visual range, then the pilot could attack. This transformed night fighting effectiveness. German night fighter ace Major Heinz Wolfgang Schnaufer would eventually achieve 121 confirmed night victories using radar-equipped Bf 110 and later Heinkel Her-219 aircraft. The system worked so well that by 1943, RAF bomber losses to night fighters exceeded 10% on some raids. This was unsustainable, and RAF developed countermeasures. The British response was window, metallized paper strips cut to half the wavelength of German radar frequencies, dropped from bombers in massive quantities. Each strip created a radar return. Thousands of bombers appeared on German radar screens, overwhelming operators, making it impossible to distinguish real bombers from chaff. Window was first used over Hamburg in July 1943 during Operation Gomorrah. German night defenses collapsed. Only 12 bombers lost from a force of over 700. German radar was effectively blinded. This was Germany's introduction to electronic warfare, and it forced rapid adaptation. Germany responded by developing new radar systems operating on different frequencies. The FUG 212 Liechtenstein SN2, operated at 90 MHz, lower frequency than previous systems. This made it less susceptible to window, and German night fighters recovered effectiveness. By late 1943, they were shooting down British bombers at high rates again. RAF bomber command losses mounted, and Germany believed it had regained technological advantage in night combat. This confidence would prove misplaced. American involvement in strategic night operations began later than British. The 8th Air Force focused on daylight precision bombing. But by mid-1944, the need for night transport operations became critical. Moving supplies and personnel to newly liberated territories in France and Belgium required continuous flights. Daylight operations exposed transports to German fighters. Night flights were necessary, but German night fighters posed a threat. American planners needed solutions, and those solutions came not from building better night fighters to dogfight German night fighters, but from making American aircraft invisible to German radar. The development of American radar jamming equipment accelerated in 1943. The Naval Research Laboratory and MIT Radiation Laboratory worked on systems that could detect German radar transmissions and transmit jamming signals on the same frequencies. The APT-1 carpet jammer entered service in late 1943. This device detected German radar pulses, analyzed the frequency, and transmitted noise on that frequency. The result was that German radar screens showed static instead of clear returns. The bomber carrying the jammer would disappear into the noise. This worked against German ground radars and airborne intercept radars, and it was compact enough to be carried by bombers and transport aircraft. By late 1944, most American heavy bombers flying over Europe carried some form of radar jamming equipment, and transport aircraft flying night supply missions were being equipped as well. This was the technology that made Wilhelm Jonen's targets disappear. The transport he was tracking activated its jamming equipment. His Liechtenstein radar screen filled with noise. The target return vanished, and Jonen was left searching empty sky. This was not a malfunction. This was electronic warfare, and German night fighters had no effective counter. The psychological impact on German night fighter crews was severe. These were experienced airmen, many with dozens of victories. They understood their equipment, trusted their radar, and suddenly that radar was unreliable. Targets would appear, then vanish, attacks would be set up, then lost. And the frustration was compounded by the fact that ground control often still tracked targets on different radar systems. So ground controllers would insist the target was there, while the night fighter crew's radar showed nothing. This created doubt, uncertainty, and fear. Because if you cannot trust your equipment, if your radar can be fooled, then the enemy has an advantage you cannot overcome. Hauptmann Martin Drews, Nachtjagdgeschwader 1, described this uncertainty in his post-war memoir. Drews achieved 52 night victories and survived the war. According to his account, by early 1945, we knew American aircraft were jamming our radar, but we did not know how. We tried changing frequencies, switching between radar modes. Nothing worked consistently. Sometimes we could track targets. Sometimes targets disappeared. We had no way to predict when jamming would be effective. This made interceptions unreliable, and unreliable equipment in night combat is worse than no equipment, because you waste time and fuel chasing contacts that vanish, while real bombers proceed unmolested to their targets. The American electronic warfare advantage extended beyond jamming. The B-24 Liberator, operating in electronic reconnaissance role, carried equipment that could detect German radar transmissions from long distances, map their locations, and relay this information to strike aircraft. German radar stations, which needed to transmit continuously to track aircraft, were revealing their positions, and American aircraft attacked them. Using this intelligence, German radar networks were being systematically degraded through bombing attacks guided by electronic intelligence and through jamming that reduced effectiveness of surviving radars. This was coordinated electronic warfare, and Germany had no equivalent capability. The P-61 Black Widow, America's purpose-built night fighter, entered combat in Europe in July 1944. This aircraft combined radar, heavy armament, and long endurance. The SCR-720 radar could detect bombers at ranges exceeding 5 miles. 4 20mm cannons and 4 50-caliber machine guns provided firepower exceeding German night fighters, and the Black Widow could remain on patrol for hours, waiting for German night fighters to reveal themselves, because German night fighters needed radar to find targets, and their radar transmissions could be detected by American electronic surveillance aircraft, and Black Widows could be vectored to intercept. The first P-61 victory in Europe occurred July 16, 1944. Lieutenant Hermann Ernst, 422nd Night Fighter Squadron, intercepted and destroyed a Bf-110 night fighter. The German pilot never saw the Black Widow. His radar was focused forward, searching for bombers, and the Black Widow attacked from behind and below, where German radar could not detect it. This became standard American night fighter tactics. Don't hunt bombers, hunt the hunters. Intercept German night fighters while they were searching for targets, and shoot them down before they could engage. German night fighter crews were unprepared for this. They expected to be the hunters, not the hunted. Major Rudolf Schönert, one of Germany's highest-scoring night fighter aces with 64 victories, encountered a P-61 Black Widow in January 1945. According to his post-war testimony, Schönert was vectored by ground control to intercept bombers. While approaching the bomber stream, his aircraft was hit by cannon fire from behind. His radar operator was killed, his aircraft was damaged, and Schönert barely escaped. He never saw the attacking aircraft. His first indication of danger was tracer fire passing his canopy. In his post-war statement to US interrogators, Schönert said, "I had assumed we were safe from attack while hunting. We were the predators. But American night fighters changed this. They hunted us, used our radar transmissions to find us, and attacked before we knew they were there. This role reversal was psychologically devastating. We went from hunters to prey." The technical specifications of the P-61 explain its effectiveness. Maximum speed, 366 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 33,100 feet. Range over 1,000 miles with external tanks. The SCR-720 radar was the most advanced airborne intercept radar in operational use. Could track targets in 3 dimensions. Provided range, bearing, and altitude information accurate enough to guide the pilot to visual range even in total darkness. And the armament, 4 M2 20mm cannons in a remote-controlled dorsal turret, plus 4 50-caliber machine guns in the belly, could destroy any German night fighter with a single burst. The Black Widow had one additional advantage. It was quiet. The 2 Pratt and Whitney RR2800 engines were buried in the wings, muffled by the airframe. German night fighters, with their loud radial or inline engines, could be heard from miles away. The Black Widow could approach in near silence. This made visual detection almost impossible in darkness, and by the time German crews heard the engines, it was too late. They were already under attack. German attempts to counter American electronic warfare failed. Naxos, a German device that detected Allied radar transmissions, could track bombers using their H-2S ground mapping radar. But American jamming made Naxos unreliable. SN2 radar was upgraded to include anti-jamming features, but these were only partially effective against sophisticated American jammers. And by early 1945, German radar technology was being overwhelmed by American electronic warfare capabilities developed and deployed at scales Germany could not match. The strategic impact was significant. Allied transport operations, which moved thousands of tons of supplies nightly to support ground forces, proceeded with minimal losses. German night fighters, which should have been able to intercept these transports easily, were achieving almost no success. According to Allied transport command records, night transport losses to enemy action in the European theatre dropped from approximately 4% in mid-1944 to less than 1% by early 1945. This was not because German night fighters stopped trying. It was because they could not find targets. American jamming made interceptions nearly impossible. RAF Bomber Command also benefited from American electronic warfare. By late 1944, RAF bombers carried American-built jamming equipment in addition to British systems. The combined electronic warfare capabilities created a protective electronic shield that German radar could not penetrate effectively. British bomber losses, which had approached 10% on some raids in 1943, dropped to approximately 2% by early 1945. German night fighters were still dangerous, but their effectiveness had been cut by more than half. Through electronic warfare, not through superior air combat tactics, through making German radar unreliable. General Major Josef Kammhuber, architect of German night defenses and commander of night fighting forces, analyzed the collapse of German night fighting capability in post-war interrogations. According to US strategic bombing survey documents, Kammhuber stated, "We lost the night war not through inferior equipment or untrained crews. Our radar was technically sound, our pilots were experienced, but American electronic warfare rendered our systems ineffective. They could jam our radar, detect our transmissions, and hunt our fighters while remaining invisible to us. This was a technological defeat. We could not produce countermeasures fast enough, could not adapt our tactics quickly enough, and by early 1945, our night fighters were operating with reduced effectiveness, achieving perhaps half the interception rate of early 1944. This was unacceptable, but we had no solution. The human cost of this technological imbalance was severe for German night fighter crews. These were skilled airmen, many with years of experience, but skill could not overcome technological disadvantage. Oberfeldwebel Paul Zorner, who achieved 59 night victories and survived the war, described the desperation of late war night operations in his memoir. By 1945, we were flying missions knowing our equipment was compromised. Our radar would work sometimes. Other times it would show nothing but noise. We could not predict, could not plan, could only hope that tonight the jamming would be light enough for us to find targets. This was not warfare. This was gambling, and the odds were against us. The statistical evidence supports these accounts. German night fighter claims dropped from an average of approximately 5% of attacking bombers in mid-1943 to less than 2% by early 1945. Total German night fighter victories against all Allied aircraft dropped from over 700 per month in mid-1943 to fewer than 100 per month by March 1945. This was not primarily due to reduced sortie rates. German night fighters were still flying. They simply could not find targets. Electronic warfare had blinded them. The irony was complete. Germany had pioneered operational airborne radar in 1942, had achieved technological superiority in night fighting, and had inflicted terrible losses on RAF Bomber Command. But by 1945, that technological lead had been eliminated. American electronic warfare capabilities, developed through massive industrial effort and scientific research, had surpassed German systems, and Germany lacked the industrial capacity to respond effectively. Could not develop and produce new radar systems faster than America could develop countermeasures. This was industrial warfare applied to electronics, and America's advantages in research capacity, production capability, and resources were decisive. The P-61 Black Widow's combat record in Europe was modest, approximately 50 aerial victories, but its psychological impact exceeded its kill count. German night fighter crews knew American night fighters were operating, knew they were being hunted, and this knowledge changed behavior. German crews became cautious, spent more time checking behind them, less time focusing on bombers, and interception efficiency decreased. Fear of being attacked from behind degraded operational effectiveness even when no American night fighters were present. The broader Allied electronic warfare campaign extended beyond airborne jammers. Ground-based jamming stations in England transmitted powerful signals that interfered with German ground radar. These stations, operating continuously, created zones where German radar was nearly useless. Allied aircraft could approach through these zones unmolested, and German controllers could not vector night fighters effectively. This coordination between airborne and ground-based electronic warfare was unprecedented, and Germany had no equivalent capability. Major Wilhelm Jonen's final missions in early 1945 reflected the collapse of German night fighting. In his memoir, Jonen described sorties where his radar showed only noise, where ground control vectors led nowhere, and where he returned from missions without having achieved visual contact with a single enemy aircraft. According to his account, we were flying into electronic fog. Our instruments showed static, our ears heard jamming transmissions, and our eyes saw nothing. The sky was full of Allied aircraft. We could hear them, see the glow of their exhausts occasionally, but could not intercept because our radar was useless, and without radar, night fighting was impossible. We were reduced to hoping for visual contact by chance, and chance was not a tactic, it was desperation. The technical evolution of Allied electronic warfare continued through war's end. Later versions of jamming equipment could distinguish between different German radar types, could selectively jam the most threatening systems, could even transmit false returns, making German radar operators see aircraft that did not exist. This level of sophistication was beyond German capability to counter and represented fundamental superiority in electronics research and production. America had more scientists working on radar and electronic warfare than Germany had total electronics engineers. This disparity in technical manpower, combined with superior funding and industrial support, created an insurmountable advantage. Post-war analysis by both sides confirmed that electronic warfare was decisive in the night-air war over Europe. British official historians concluded that electronic warfare reduced German night fighting effectiveness by approximately 60% between mid-1943 and war's end. German Luftwaffe historical studies reached similar conclusions and credited American electronic warfare capabilities as major factor in Allied success. Not because American equipment was perfect, but because it was good enough and produced in quantities that allowed every bomber and transport to carry some form of protection. The legacy of this campaign shaped post-war military thinking. Electronic warfare became recognized as an essential component of air operations. The United States invested heavily in electronic warfare research and development. And by the Cold War, electronic warfare aircraft and systems were standard in US military doctrine. The lessons of 1944 and 45 were clear. Radar and electronic systems can be countered. Technological advantages are temporary, and the nation that can innovate faster and produce in greater quantities will dominate the electromagnetic spectrum. The Luftwaffe dismissed American night capabilities as inferior. Based on early war performance, American aircraft had limited night fighting experience. American radar technology seemed derivative, and American doctrine appeared to favor daylight operations. All these assessments were correct in 1942 and early 1943, but they failed to account for American adaptability and industrial capacity. By late 1944, American electronic warfare capabilities exceeded German systems. American night fighters were hunting German night fighters, and American transport operations proceeded unmolested despite being predictable targets. The dismissals ended when convoys vanished from radar, when German night fighter aces found themselves blind, and when the realization set in that technological superiority is not permanent, that it must be maintained through continuous innovation, and that America had the resources and determination to outpace Germany in electronic warfare just as it had in production of aircraft, tanks, and ships. Wilhelm Jonen survived the war with 34 victories, but his final missions were failures, not through lack of skill, through technological obsolescence. His radar could not penetrate American jamming, his tactics could not counter American electronic warfare, and his experience could not overcome the fundamental reality that in modern warfare, the side that controls the electromagnetic spectrum controls the battle. America controlled it. By late 1944, completely, and German night defenses, which had seemed invincible in 1943, collapsed. Not through being defeated in combat, but through being rendered blind by an enemy they had dismissed and underestimated fatally.